The unknown soldier, joined by Vice President Kamala Harris. He gave remarks addressing veterans, perhaps for the last time as Commander-in-Chief. Let's take a listen.
It's been the greatest honor of my life to lead you, to serve you, to care for you, to defend you, just as you defended us.
That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report on November 11th, 2024. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Tonight, President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet begins to take shape, with his transition team working to fill key roles in his administration. This as the Democratic Party tries to figure out what went wrong this election.
One thing that both of these people have in common is their loyalty to the president-elect over the years. They have been staunch Trumpers.
The reason we didn't win ultimately is we didn't listen enough to people on the ground.
Clearly, not enough voters knew what Democrats were going to do to make their lives better, particularly poor and working class Americans across this country.
Well, there are cultural issues involved in elections as well. Guns, God, and gays. That's the way they say it.
So to me, it's not just about the campaign. It's about what does the Democratic Party stand for.
The Jennings Creek fire in New Jersey has scorched 3,000 acres and has threatened dozens of buildings.
Weather conditions are helping firefighters gain ground on the mountain fire that's consumed more than 20,000 acres.
The jury has found an Indiana man guilty of killing 2 teenage girls.
It is a balance between mitigating factors and aggravating factors, and what a judge thinks is reasonable.
This is the last time I will stand here at Arlington as Commander-in-Chief. It's been the greatest honor of my life to lead you, to serve you, care for you, to defend you.
Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report with the first look at what Donald Trump's second administration may look like. President-elect has tapped Congresswoman Elise Stefanik for UN ambassador. Former Congressman Lee Zeldin has been picked to head the Environmental Protection Agency. CBS News has also learned Trump plans to name his former advisor Stephen Miller as his deputy chief of staff for policy. And Trump has selected Tom Homan to serve as his administration's border czar. Homan, a former acting director of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, had been an ardent supporter of Trump administration policies that led to thousands of migrant families being separated. He spoke to Fox News Monday morning about his new appointment.
I'm honored the president asked me to come back and help solve this national security crisis, so I'm looking forward to it. Every morning I get up. Every morning I'm pissed off about what this administration did to the most secure border in my lifetime, so I'm going to go back and do what I can to fix it.
Democrats in Congress are reacting to some of Trump's cabinet picks and trying to work out what it means for the policies they say they'll be fighting against on Capitol Hill over the next 4 years.
Well, look, I think the election results made clear this is going to be a very challenging time. Stephen Miller and Tom Homan were the architects of a lot of the first Trump administration horrific immigration policies. And so family separation, mass detentions, those kinds of things is what was promised and by the Trump administration, and I think what we're going to have to fight.
Members of the Democratic Party have yet to unify on what core issues led to their losses this election. Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi said in an interview with the New York Times, quote, "I do have a discomfort level with some of the Democrats right now who are saying, oh, we abandoned the working class. No, we didn't. That's who we are." It's a direct contradiction to what some of her colleagues are saying, including fellow California Congressman Ro Khanna, who says Democrats didn't emphasize the party's, quote, better economic story.
We did not have a compelling enough economic vision. The Democratic Party should have one simple mission, and that is to address the economic hardships and struggles of many Americans, not just working class Americans, a large slice of Americans who feel the American dream has slipped away for their families and their kids.
CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa joins me now. Thank you so much for being here this evening. First, what do Trump's cabinet picks so far tell you about the type of administration he wants to have?
Good to be with you. So far, President-elect Trump is picking loyalists to fill up some of the key roles inside his administration. He is also balancing those who are generationally young with his own generation in being in his upper 70s. He's picking young members of Congress, former members of Congress so far, to staff up and run EPA, to be the U.S. voice for the country at the United Nations. And you see in Susie Wiles, someone who's a trusted advisor from the campaign. And Stephen Miller, he won't be needing Senate confirmation as Deputy Chief of Staff of the White House, but you can bet, based on my conversations with Trump associates, he will have enormous power working with Tom Homan and others on border policy.
Well, Miller, we know, is an immigration hardliner. He got some attention last month during that rally at Madison Square Garden in which he said America is for Americans and Americans only. Between Homan and Miller, both who have championed Trump's hardline immigration stances from his first administration, including the family separation policy, can we expect an equal or even more hardline stance in his second term?
There's a belief inside the Trump inner circle that President-elect Trump has a real mandate on border policy. When I spoke to President-elect Trump on Election Day, he said he's looking at the exit polls and he knows the economy is a driving issue for many voters, but he really believes, because, as he put it, he was strong on immigration. That was his characterization. That leaves him in a position, now that he's won over 300 electoral votes in the popular vote, to really move fast on these mass deportations. The question's going to be, for the Trump administration, what defines the word mass? Is it going to be 1 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million? Logistically, how is that possible? Financially, what's the buy-in from Congress about the scope of this policy? And you can expect a lot of conversations in the coming weeks about all of those matters.
On the Democratic side, what sort of conversations are happening behind the scenes regarding what went wrong this election and the next steps for the party working under a Trump administration?
Because Vice President Harris ran a compressed campaign, I'm not detecting in my reporting any anger toward her. There's some frustration among some Democrats with President Biden for the late exit out of the race. But many Biden allies would counter that, and they have to me privately, that they believe President Biden should have stayed in the race and might have beaten President-elect Trump. So the Democratic back and forth is going to continue for quite some time. The question is going to be, does Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic House leader from New York, can he start to really build towards 2026 and winning back the House?
Robert Costa, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For more on the potential changes to immigration policy under the Trump administration, let's turn to CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez. Camilo, so good to see you here in Studio 57 in New York. So Tom Homan appeared on 60 Minutes last month and was asked, there wasn't much of an outline, how the government would carry out the largest deportation in American history. He was asked how it would work. Here's some of what he said.
We have seen one estimate that says it would cost $88 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Is that what American taxpayers should expect?
What price do you put on national security? Is that worth it?
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
Camilo, what are the challenges of a policy like this, both on a humanitarian, logistical, financial basis, all of it?
Well, Lindsay, this operation will certainly face significant and formidable legal, operational, and humanitarian challenges. On the operational and financial front, we know that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the agency that would be primarily responsible for carrying out these mass deportations, only has about 6,000 deportation agents and about 41,000 detention beds. That is not nearly enough to detain, arrest, and deport everyone who is in this country illegally. The last estimate from the Department of Homeland Security puts that number at around 11 million people living in the country illegally. And obviously, when the vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, the vice president-elect, says that 1 million deportations would be carried out in a single year, it is really difficult to see that happening now, especially because Congress has not allocated enough funding for ICE to carry out that number of deportations. But obviously,
manpower to go and find people and to house them in detention.
That is correct. And this is really labor-intensive work. And it could be that the Republican Congress, and it does seem like the House is going in the GOP's favor, does fund this operation. But there are also humanitarian challenges. Right now, there are millions of children who are U.S. citizens who live with an undocumented parent, about 4 million, according to one study. The question is, Lindsay, what happens to the children who have legal status here or who have U.S. citizenship if their undocumented parents are targeted for deportation? Do they get deported together? The U.S. government does not have the legal authority to deport a U.S. citizen. Or do they get sent to another guardian? Do they stay here in the foster care system? These are humanitarian challenges that the second Trump administration will face. And we actually spoke to an immigration attorney in Tucson about the concern that right now many immigrants are feeling. Let's take a listen.
It's a harsh and cruel reality that us immigrants are going to have to face once January 20 comes along.
Why do you say that?
There's so many threats affecting our immigrant community. First of all, this massive deportation plan is going to incarcerate immigrant families. It's going to separate immigrant families. It's going to create fear.
And what advocates also tell me and immigration attorneys tell me, Lindsay, is that they are going to try to make the case in the court of public opinion that these mass deportations will be cruel, inhumane, and draconian. But obviously, as you know, we have seen polling indicating that more and more Americans are supporting restrictive immigration policies, including this pledge to carry out the largest deportation in American history.
Trump made it a point of every rally, and he won in a landslide. So a large number of people who could be deported under Trump's plans were allowed to enter the U.S. legally under 2 Biden programs. What happens to them?
That is an excellent question, because in addition to the 11 million undocumented immigrants estimated to be living in the U.S., most of them have been here for decades, if not more, in the country illegally. There are also hundreds of thousands of migrants who have recently arrived to the U.S. under Biden administration programs that were designed to alleviate pressure at the border, to give people who were intending to cross the border illegally a safe and legal alternative to doing that by coming to the U.S. legally. They are right now here on a temporary legal status that can be revoked unilaterally by the next administration. And President-elect Trump has promised as much, that he will terminate these programs, and now these immigrants will become part of the undocumented immigrant population. And if a judge decides that they are not eligible for asylum, they are subject to deportation. So the pool of people who could be deported could be much larger than the 11 million people who are currently here illegally.
Camila Montoya Galvez, I'm sure we'll be talking to you in the days, weeks, months to come. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Control of the House of Representatives has yet to be decided, with about a dozen races that still haven't been called. CBS News characterizes the House as lean Republican, but neither party has officially made it past the 218-seat mark to officially become the majority. The House is currently controlled by Republicans. A couple of Senate races have also not been called, Arizona and Pennsylvania. Republicans already flipped the upper chamber. They will control it with at least a 2-seat majority. Senate Republicans will vote Wednesday on new party leadership. President-elect Trump has already weighed in with his demands, making it clear he would like his nominees to be installed immediately. He posted on social media that anyone seeking the position as Senate Majority Leader, quote, must agree to recess appointments. That enables a president to temporarily install nominees without the Senate confirmation process. Multiple wildfires are burning across the Northeast. New Jersey is dealing with 2 fires, including this one burning in Passaic County. Fires are also impacting Massachusetts and New York, where an 18-year-old volunteer firefighter was killed. Tom Hansen is in Greenwood Lake, New York, with the latest.
Good evening. We're at the Greenwood Lake Fire Department, which has become the command center on this side of the response to this blaze. The blaze really straddles the line between New York and New Jersey, so officials on both sides are coming together in order to create a joint task force, take this on. And what we've seen behind us is a pretty active scene. Fire rescue and crews going out through the communities in order to attempt to put out these blazes when they are popping up. Most of the blazes, we've learned, are actually in heavily wooded areas. The blaze has expanded in size, 5,000 acres. It is at about 20% containment, so there's a long way to go before this thing is under control. The question now shifts to the forecast looking ahead in the coming days. We are seeing dry conditions. We're seeing wind gusts, especially tomorrow, between 20 and 30 miles an hour. And as we know, that can pick up those embers that may be smoldering on the ground and start new fires. So that is certainly of concern. Now, crews on both sides, New Jersey and New York, said they are confident that they will ultimately contain this, and they are actively working, but it looks like there is a long road ahead before they get this blaze under control. Back to you. Crews
say they're making some headway as they battle a massive wildfire in Southern California. The mountain fire has burned through more than 20,000 acres in Ventura County, which is located about 65 miles northwest of Los Angeles. As of Monday afternoon, 36% of the fire has been contained. CBS News Los Angeles' Tina Patel has more.
We have been talking to firefighters this morning, and even though they are pleased with the progress they've been making, they know that the winds are supposed to pick up back tomorrow. So they're hoping that that won't cause any more damage. We can already see some of the damage that this fire tore through in this neighborhood. But residents here say they're trying to look on the bright side.
This is the other goal. This is the eternity ring.
Bridget Talley was relieved that she was able to recover a few pieces of heirloom jewelry from what's left of her home. She takes care of an older woman who uses a walker. So she says when the fire started moving through her neighborhood last week, getting that woman out safely was her first concern. She didn't think about what she was leaving behind. Firefighters are still doing damage assessment, but they estimate there are around 200 homes that were either damaged or destroyed by the mountain fire. Talley says it's strange to come back and see that some homes in her neighborhood were untouched, but she doesn't blame firefighters. She said they did the best they could with winds last week that were out of control.
It was so scary that I've never experienced that before. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, oh my God, I thank God we got out. We got out with the clothes on our back. We couldn't grab anything because it was so fast. And it terrified me.
Last night there was a community meeting so firefighters could update the public on the fire. They have now got 36% containment, and they're starting to lift some evacuation orders and warnings, but there's still some road closures in areas where utilities are still being repaired. Now, they wanted people affected by this fire to know that there are resources for them both in the short term and long term. That's why there is going to be another community meeting Wednesday night where people can ask specific questions and get connected to those that can help. In Camarillo, Tina Patel, KCAL News.
Israel is ramping up attacks on Gaza and Lebanon as the country faces a deadline to allow more aid to reach Palestinians or see a loss in U.S. military funding. Our Elizabeth Palmer is at the Israel-Gaza border with the latest. Plus, Donald Trump taps a former New York congressman to lead the Environmental Protection Agency when he takes office. Who is Lee Zeldin, and what is his record on climate policy? We'll take a closer look. You're watching The Daily Report.
Come on, Julia. Oh, no. I will if you will. You go, gal. That's right.
Let me see if you can find me.
I want to make sure that my voice is heard, but also that I lift up other voices.
You can't write a better script.
Yeah, boy! It's gonna be a ride. Sunshine is down.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
How fast do you think you were going? 195 miles an hour. This is incredible.
How close did you actually come to being killed?
That close.
Is this brain surgery without a knife?
It is.
What risk do these children pose to Russia?
I'm not sure the world is prepared for this change.
Definitely not.
Who's the best coach in college football today?
Let me see a mirror.
It's time for the CBS News original, 60 Minutes. Sundays on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
I'm a voracious consumer of information and constantly curious. I want to know the basic facts of every issue and to press into the heart of the matter. Information is the currency of democracy, and that's what we bring to the table every Sunday.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
we're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
Find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
An Indiana jury has convicted 52-year-old Richard Allen of murder 7 years after 2 teenage girls vanished during a hike. CBS News correspondent Ian Lee has more on the verdict.
It took the jury only 4 days to find Richard Allen guilty on 4 counts of murder. As the judge read the verdict, the 52-year-old Allen remained stoic, but behind him, his family was weeping. I was sitting behind the families of the 2 murdered girls. They embraced each other. There were tears in their eyes. Outside the courthouse, there were some cheers of joy. Now, back in 2017, Liberty German and Abigail Williams were walking down an abandoned railroad bridge when they spotted a man walking behind them. Libby pulled out her phone, recorded a video. In the background, you can see a grainy image of a man. Police say Allen was that man, but it took him 5 years before they arrested him. While behind bars, Richard Allen confessed multiple times to killing the girls, but the defense says those confessions were made under duress as he had been in solitary confinement for more than a year. They also say there was no DNA evidence linking him to the murders. But on Saturday, the jury asked to review 2 videos of police interviews with Allen. In them, he is said to be cooperative, but later, when the police say he is a suspect and asked to look around his house, he then becomes, as they say, uncooperative. And that may have been key in their decision today. Richard Allen will now be sentenced on December 20th. He faces up to 130 years in prison. Ian Lee, CBS News, Delphi, Indiana.
Ukraine's president says the Russian military has sent some 50,000 troops to Russia's Kursk region ahead of a planned attack there. It's the same area where Ukraine launched an offensive against Russia earlier this year, which took Moscow by surprise. CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay has the latest.
Good evening. Ukraine says at least 6 people were killed after the latest series of airstrikes by Russia. This after a weekend that saw the biggest exchange of drones between Russia and Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion nearly 3 years ago. Ukraine fired dozens into the skies over Moscow, injuring a woman, officials said, and temporarily shutting down Russia's biggest airport in the Kremlin's own backyard. On the same night, Ukraine says Russia fired a record 145 drones at cities like Odessa, killing 1 and injuring dozens. Russia has intensified its offensive in Ukraine's east, but at a heavy cost, suffering its worst casualty figures in October since the start of the war, with more than 1,500 killed or wounded every single day on average. But for Ukraine, arms and ammo are running low. Now, the big question lingering for Ukraine is, will President-elect Donald Trump, once in office, cut off that crucial U.S. military aid to Ukraine as he has threatened to this crucial American ally? Back to you.
Chris Livesay, thank you. Palestinian health officials say at least 40 Palestinians in Gaza were killed Sunday in multiple Israeli strikes. One of those strikes damaged a 3-story building in the northern part of Gaza. Israel claims terrorists were operating in the area and posed a threat to Israeli troops. Meanwhile, Israel faces a Wednesday deadline to comply with the Biden administration's deadline to increase aid to Gaza or face restrictions on American military support. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer is at the Israel-Gaza border, where some aid trucks are passing through.
Behind me, you can see food aid in Israel ready to be driven into Gaza. There's wheat flour to make bread. We've got blankets, toilet paper, essentials. It's a cumbersome business because the trucks will have to drive through the heavily guarded border, unload, and then have Palestinian trucks pick it up, reload it, and distribute it further inside the Gaza Strip. Today, about 150 trucks are going to cross into Gaza through 4 crossings. Under pressure from the Americans, the amount of aid is slowly increasing from a low in October of about 30 trucks a day. We're up to 150. A new crossing is supposed to open, says Israel, although they haven't told us when. But that's still 200 trucks short of the American target of 300 trucks a day. And in a letter, the U.S. has warned that if Israel doesn't meet that aid target, it risks losing defense assistance. It will face a reduction in the amount of military aid coming in that allows it to continue to fight this war. Back to you.
Elizabeth Palmer, thank you. Delegates from nearly 200 countries are gathering in Azerbaijan for the UN Climate Change Conference, as Earth is on track to set a new record for the hottest year. According to the International Chamber of Commerce, climate-related extreme weather has cost the global economy more than $2 trillion over the past decade. The U.S. saw the biggest loss at nearly $935 million. Participating countries have so far been unable to deliver on promises from last year's event surrounding energy production. President Biden is not attending, but U.S. climate advisor John Podesta warned delegates about the incoming Trump administration's stance on the issue.
In January, we're going to inaugurate a president whose relationship to climate change is captured by the words hoax and fossil fuels. He's vowed to dismantle our environmental safeguards and once again withdraw the United States from the Paris Agreement. That is what he has said, and we should believe him.
Podesta said progress is still possible despite a, quote, U-turn from the Trump administration. The climate summit runs through November 22nd. Later this hour, we'll speak with our national environmental correspondent, David Schechter, for more on the UN climate summit and President-elect Trump's EPA pick, Lee Zeldin. That's right here on CBS News. Still to come, Donald Trump's second presidency could have implications for the U.S.'s future in several foreign policy matters, including its involvement in NATO, what that could mean for the alliance. You're watching The Daily Report.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
Let 60 Minutes take you on a private tour of the National Archives.
So there may be treasures like this buried in boxes.
Historical secrets from America's past.
So this is original from 1778?
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places. Bright, shiny faces.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Put me in the game, coach.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
The best interviews feel like it's just a conversation with a neighbor.
Hey. Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask a question that is the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'll see you in the morning.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
The grief of losing a child is immense. You can't breathe.
After decades of the war on drugs, things have only gotten worse.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
CBS Reports goes deep into Mexico.
What is your role in the Sinaloa cartel?
To find out why the cartels keep getting stronger and wealthier.
This is a war, but we're not fighting it. Our citizens are dying.
Funding Cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Here are some additions to our top stories. Americans nationwide honored military service members Monday for Veterans Day. In New York City, an estimated 20,000 participants from across the country marched through Manhattan in the 105th annual parade. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is opening an investigation into complaints that engines could fail on as many as 1.4 million Honda and Acura vehicles. The investigation involves several models spanning from 2016 through 2020, and popular models include the Honda Pilot and Acura MDX. One owner reported a crash connected to the issue, but no injuries. Honda said it will cooperate with the investigation. Bitcoin hit a new high Monday, surpassing the $85,000 mark for the first time. The cryptocurrency's price has been rising steadily since President-elect Trump's victory. While on the campaign trail, Trump promised to make the U.S. the crypto capital of the planet and to build a national stockpile of Bitcoin. We're continuing to follow Donald Trump's upcoming second term in the White House as he begins to fill out top positions in his administration. And as we mentioned, the president-elect has selected who he wants to lead the Environmental Protection Agency. Trump announced Monday he'll nominate former Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York. Here's what Zeldin said about his priorities in an interview shortly after the announcement was made public.
So day one and the first 100 days, we have the opportunity to roll back regulations. There are regulations that the left wing of this country have been advocating through regulatory power that ends up causing businesses to go in the wrong direction.
For more, let's bring in national environmental correspondent David Schechter. David, so good to have you here in New York. I want to go ahead and pull up Lee Zeldin's tweet announcing that he was honored for this appointment. If we could pull that up so I could read a little bit. So he says, we're going to restore U.S. energy dominance, revitalize our auto industry to bring back American jobs, and make the U.S. the global leader of AI. We'll do so while protecting access to clean air and water. Rolling back regulations, boosting energy and auto production, but also protecting clean air and water. Are those opposing ideas, or can they do it all?
I think the answer is potentially they're not opposing, but I think in reality you have to look at what President Trump is trying to accomplish with the EPA. He wants to, as largely as possible, reduce the influence of the EPA, eliminate regulation, go after climate change policies, and the EPA is the place where you do that. So he said that's what he wanted to do. He brings in a congressman, former congressman, who's very loyal to him, who's really has no history of showing really any interest in the EPA, has voted with environmental issues only 14% of the time. And so this is most likely, you'd have to say, this is the tool that President Trump-elect is going to use to reduce the power of the EPA.
So, I mean, broadly speaking, you kind of mentioned how the Trump administration will approach environmental policy, but what has history taught us about some of those policies and whether they are either contributing to or antithetical to, for example, reducing greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, in his first administration, rolled back 100 previous regulations that were pro-climate and has removed the United States from the Paris Accords, which is the most significant climate roundtable in the world where the nations of the world get together and deal with climate issues, and says he wants to do it again now. So, hard to say what the trajectory of our climate will look like, but we're kind of going like this as it's like reducing emissions. The United States has actually peaked in its emissions, and that's where we need to go in that direction. So what's the delta between we're trying to go this way and remove the regulations and go that way? I think you're going to see more emissions in this country, and I think that's sort of the point.
We're kind of talking at a macro level, but we know that the Biden administration has made it a point to focus on environmental justice, making sure that communities that are more vulnerable trying to undo some of those sort of systemic cultural issues. Can we expect that sort of those efforts may go by the wayside?
I would think that, yes, that's one thing you would expect. You want as little environment. If you're President Trump, you want as little environmental regulation as possible, and that would probably mean, including these fence line communities that complain about, hey, we're living in the shadow of a oil refinery and our air is dirty, or you're dumping all this, shingles in the neighborhood next to ours and we can't breathe the air anymore. Those are the way that you get at that is through regulation and enforcement. And I think the president's interest is in less regulation and less enforcement.
I got to be quick with you on the last one. The UN climate conference is underway right now in Azerbaijan. What does Trump's election win mean for American global leadership for climate? And do you expect that the administration might even sort of roll back some of what is agreed upon this week?
I think it'll be difficult to agree upon anything this week in terms of what the United States brings to the table. You got a lame duck administration. Whatever they say there will be taken with a grain of salt by the world. But I would think that Trump will withdraw from the Paris Accords again, and you just create this vacuum of leadership in the world that the United States has heretofore occupied and will now be empty and probably be filled by countries like China or others who want to lead on this and see this as an opportunity to also make a lot of money in a new green economy.
David Schechter, thank you.
Thank you.
A Disney cruise ship came to the rescue of 4 people on a small boat that was sinking off the Bermuda coast Sunday. Officials say the boat called for help after it began taking on water. The Coast Guard says it alerted nearby vessels for assistance. The closest one was the Disney Treasure, the company's newest cruise liner that hasn't even taken its maiden voyage yet. The cruise ship was able to launch a lifeboat and rescue all 4 stranded passengers. Disney says its ship was traveling to its future home port in Florida from the Netherlands when it was called in for action. A Spirit Airlines flight from Florida to Haiti had to divert to the Dominican Republic Monday after the plane was hit by gunfire. According to flight tracking website FlightAware, the plane circled around Haiti's capital city before heading to the neighboring country. Spirit says the damage on the plane is consistent with gunfire. A flight attendant sustained minor injuries, but no passengers were injured. The U.S. Embassy in Haiti issued an alert warning of gang violence in the country. As we've been reporting, President-elect Trump is working to fill out top positions in his administration, and comments that Trump made during the campaign trail could give us insight into his foreign policy agenda. Here's what he said about the NATO military alliance in February.
One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
NATO members are expected to meet the alliance's guideline of spending 2% of their GDP on defense spending. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says he looks forward to working with Trump next year and noted that 2/3 of NATO countries currently meet that goal. Matthew Kroenig joins us now. He's a professor of government and foreign service at Georgetown University. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Given Trump's previous relationship with NATO, would you expect a renewed conversation within the alliance about defense spending, and what would that mean for its members?
Yes, I think so. NATO adopted its first serious defense plan since the end of the Cold War last year. And NATO leaders I talk to say that to provide the capabilities needed for those plans, that the allies are going to have to spend about 3.5% of GDP on defense. The current target is only 2%, so it's not enough. On the campaign trail, Trump has said that allies are going to have to spend 3%, and I think he's right on the merits, if not a bit short. So I think that will be another major theme of his presidency, like it was in the first term, of getting NATO allies to step up and provide for the common defense.
Specifically on Ukraine, Trump's former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Trump won't let Putin roll through Ukraine. But congressional Republicans have been critical of sending more aid. How do you see the Trump administration approaching the war and relations with Vladimir Putin?
Well, I'd start by saying that the war is not going well currently. Russia is taking back territory. On the current path, it looks more likely that Russia wins than that Ukraine wins. And so Trump has been very clear and consistent on the campaign trail. He said he wants to stop the war and stop the killing. And so I think what he's going to try to do is to force a negotiation immediately between Zelensky and Putin to get some kind of ceasefire, if not a more permanent peace deal.
Would that include Russia annexing parts of Ukraine, and what would that mean for the globe?
I think there are a lot of details to be spelled out. Who would be at the table? What is the future status of Ukraine? It looks to me likely, just given where we are militarily, that Russia would remain occupying about 20% of Ukraine that it currently occupies. But that doesn't mean that that would have to be legally recognized. It could be recognized as the status quo for now and illegal occupation of Ukrainian territory to be negotiated later. But again, I think the initial focus is going to be on stopping the current violence.
In the Middle East, Trump has named Congresswoman Elise Stefanik as UN ambassador. Here's what she said when she spoke at Israel's legislature in May.
As long as I serve the American people, I will defend George Washington's vision of religious pluralism and freedom. Today, this means crushing anti-Semitism at home and supplying the state of Israel with what it needs, when it needs it, without conditions to achieve total victory in the face of evil.
Given Stefanik's support of Israel and Trump's relationship with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, what could Middle East policy look like under Trump?
I think the first term provides a good guide. In the first term, the Trump administration put in place a so-called maximum pressure campaign against Iran, was tough on Iran and terrorists, and supported traditional U.S. partners in the region like Israel and the Gulf states. The Biden administration took a different approach, centered its foreign policy on trying to get a nuclear deal with Iran. That hasn't worked. And so I think a second Trump administration is going to return to that approach from the first term of putting pressure on Iran, on terrorists, but more fully supporting Israel and its right to defend itself and trying to repair relationships with the Gulf states.
Matthew Kronig, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Japanese lawmakers have re-elected Shigeru Ishiba as the country's prime minister, even after his party lost its majority for the first time in 15 years. Ishiba's Liberal Democratic Party suffered major losses in last month's general election. The party faced backlash from voters over a financial scandal and economic concerns. Ishiba has said he wants to enact tougher restrictions on the misuse of political funds, build up the country's military, and strengthen ties with the United States. Fewer women voted for Vice President Kamala Harris in this election than they did for President Biden 4 years ago. So what happened with the female vote? We'll take a closer look at why that support dropped this year and how it compares to elections prior. You're watching The Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
A record number of women will serve as governors next year. Republican Kelly Ayotte was elected last week to lead New Hampshire. Once she's inaugurated early next year, she'll become the 13th woman to be a sitting governor of a U.S. state. That breaks the record set in 2022 when 12 women held the position simultaneously. But the governorship isn't the only elected office where women made history this election. For the first time ever, 2 black women will serve in the U.S. Senate at the same time. And in the House of Representatives, Sarah McBride will become the first openly transgender member of Congress. But for the second time in history, a woman at the top of a major party's presidential ticket has failed to be elected to the White House. Vice President Kamala Harris received a smaller share of the female vote than the past 3 Democratic nominees for president did. Take a look at the numbers on your screen. Her predecessor, President Biden, had her beat among women by 4 points. Lindsay Chervinsky joins me now. She's the executive director of the George Washington Presidential Library and the author of the book Making the Presidency, John Adams and the Precedents That Forged the Republic. Lindsay, thanks for being here. Does the shift in the way women voted this election align with the general movement of the country, or were women an outlier?
I think the shift in women voters is pretty consistent with what we have seen across the board. I think a lot of the American people were unhappy with where the country was going, and that was consistent regardless of race or gender.
Women turned out at a higher rate than men this election, 53 to 47%. What issues tend to drive women to the polls? We know they're not a monolith. And how does that differ across demographics, like where you live or your racial identity?
Well, I think one of the things that we've seen is that some of the issues that we really expected women to vote on, in particular bodily autonomy, in the wake of the overturning of Roe versus Wade, didn't have the same sort of impact that we may have expected, and had less impact than things like the economy, prices, inflation, immigration, crime. Those tended to be the issues that were most dominant. And that was especially true in places like Texas, Arizona, places that were border areas where immigration and crime as a result were extra pressing. And we saw some of the biggest shifts.
We know that the answer to this is split among Democrats, but how do you think identity politics plays into elections? Do you think it has hurt women and minorities in the past who highlighted their identity as part of their campaign?
Well, I think it has certainly had a symbolic importance at key moments in the past to bring awareness to certain issues. So, for example, Shirley Chisholm was the first woman to run for president in a major political party, and she really embraced the difference of her identity. She didn't shy away from it, whereas I think others have been less inclined to embrace that identity, or at least to make as big of a campaign issue out of it. Barack Obama always used to say that he was running for all Americans because it was pretty obvious that he was a Black man, and so he didn't need to make a major issue out of that on the campaign trail. I think that we have certainly seen in the last couple of cycles of elections that it hasn't been maybe the driving force that people might have expected, and has at times actually caused backlash because it has alienated other voters that most politicians need to win.
Lindsay Chervinsky, thank you.
Thank you.
New research shows that Americans have increased their consumption of alcohol at an alarming rate since the pandemic. Experts are now calling it an urgent public health issue. Stephanie Stahl has one woman's story.
Lainey Warnicki has been sober for 4 years.
I was under the false belief that it's what I needed to relax. Alcohol was the cure for a bad day, or what you used to celebrate. The more I used it, the more I wanted to turn to it.
The 40-year-old mother of two says things got worse during the pandemic.
It seemed like more and more people were drinking more than ever. So it was kind of more permission, or it validated what I was doing.
New research shows alcohol use increased among adults during the COVID-19 pandemic and continued through 2022.
Originally, the increase in drinking was due to social isolation, disruption in daily activity, and general lack of accessibility to healthcare and mental health care during a really stressful time. However, we're seeing that these trends are sustained, meaning that either people don't know where to get help, they don't know that they need help.
Dr. Divya Ayala with Thomas Jefferson University Hospital says more patients are coming in with alcohol-related health problems like severe liver disease. The study also found the increases in alcohol use were higher for women.
I think on TikTok and Instagram, we talk about drinking wine as mommy juice, and it's become a very socially acceptable way to deal with life.
I'm a present mom. I have tons of hobbies, and I just am trying to figure out how to add more hours to the day to do all the fun things that I like to do now.
Lainey joined the group Sober Mom Squad.
You're not alone. There are so many moms, women, humans out there that are questioning their relationship with alcohol.
She leads a mentorship program helping other women start their sobriety journey. Stephanie Stahl, CBS News.
There's an update to the great monkey escape of 2024. Some of the missing animals have been retrieved, but there's still more on the run. How they're enticing them back with some sweet gestures. You're watching the Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
On 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This is the last time I will stand here at Arlington as Commander-in-Chief. It's been the greatest honor of my life to lead you, to serve you, to care for you, to defend you, just as you defended us, generation after generation after generation.
That was President Biden speaking during a Veterans Day ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery Monday. Biden, alongside Vice President Kamala Harris, laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier, a symbolic gravesite that represents the American troops whose remains have never been found or identified. It was Biden's and Harris's first joint appearance since Tuesday's election loss. Authorities are clamping down on the monkey business. After 5 days, more than half of the 43 monkeys that escaped from a South Carolina research breeding facility have been safely recovered, according to the lab's CEO. The lab says the remaining monkey fugitives are actually close to the facility and coo at their companions inside. The nearby woods cannot sustain the monkeys, so authorities are luring them back with food trails into humane traps. The monkeys first made a break for it Wednesday after an employee did not fully lock a door behind them. After taking a detour of more than 2,200 miles, an emperor penguin arrived where none of its kind have swam before, Australia. Earlier this month, the adult male penguin was found on a popular tourist beach in southwest Australia, far from its home in Antarctica. It's the first emperor penguin to be reported in Australia, and this sighting is the further its species has been seen from its natural habitat. The penguin was found malnourished but is now being cared for by a wildlife expert. The Australian government is still deciding whether it could eventually return home. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. President-elect Trump starts to assemble his White House team. We'll break down what his latest selections tell us about the type of administration he plans to have. One of Trump's newest selections is a border czar, following a campaign heavily focused on immigration. More on the future administration's plans for mass deportations. And raging wildfires scorch both sides of the country. We'll have an update on where efforts to fight the flames stand. You're watching CBS News.